appropriately. So, you know, our symposium, thank you for it coming to the Future of English Eastern Regional Virtual Symposium, right? The goal of today, you know, I've put on the little slide my little dictionary entry, and there are lots of different meanings of symposium, but one of them is, you know, a social gathering where there's a free exchange of ideas. And I think that it's really helpful for us when we're thinking about the future of English as a discipline, the future of English institutionally, the future of all of these things, that we share as many ideas as we can going forward. And so a few thanks. First of all, I want to thank all of our speakers. We just heard from Emily Meixner and Kristen Luchow, and then we've got Tyler Hubbert, Sam Atzeni, Carly DaSilva, Lindsey, Warren, Dietrich, and Catherine of the class of 2043. And then later on today, Jessica Abelafia, Diane Steinberg, and Rita Bruno, Albie Hayes, and Avina Sharma. I owe a tremendous debt to the people in the central office at Sigma Tau Delta, especially Elfie Gabriel and Katie Mudd, as well as our TCNJ English Department Program Assistant, without which we would not be able to do really anything, even figure out which way is up, Michelle Ordini. The officers and members of Alpha Epsilon Alpha chapter at TCNJ, the Eastern Region student leaders, both of whom are on our call here, Albie Hayes and Mary Wang, and all of our registrants. So thank you so much. So today, you know, I as I said, this is a sort of free exchange of ideas, and so I'm gonna stop our share. Just with our schedule, after this session, we've got a session on community engagement, chapter recruiting, and then an Ask Me Anything as your regent session. But I want to get all of you started because, you know, all of you are in different kinds of publishing. And so one of the things that I wanted us to do was to kind of, I'm going to ask you guys to sort of, you know, start by talking about what kind of publishing you do, and your sort of path to that. I don't know which order everybody's in, but Tyler, I was hoping that I could ask you to start, because you're because the kind of publishing that you're in might be a little bit more sort of recognizable to people who've been working with academic books.
Yeah, definitely. So I graduated TCNJ just to start in 2019, so I'm a little recent. And I work for Princeton University Press, which is traditional publishing, but it's specifically academic publishing. So just as like a little disclaimer, explain the difference. So academic publishing versus like trade house publishing, you know, that would be more like Random House, Simon & Schuster, kind of like those kind of books. Academic publishers are still kind of, you know, all different, but Princeton University Press, mainly all nonfiction books, a couple of poetry books. Academic publishing is also, it's mainly like professors, PhDs, but a lot of people end up publishing their dissertations or research they've been working on for a very long time. So it's a lot more scholarly, but we do still publish like regular trade-ish books that you would see at like Barnes and Noble, things like that. But then we also publish like textbooks and things like that. So we at Princeton University Press have a very huge range. And then we operate like a regular publisher. So we have editors, publicists, which is the department that I work in. We have a sales team, we have designers, and you'd also see our books in a lot of publications that you'd see more mainstream books. So we get reviewed in like New York Review of Books, New York Times. I'm like completely blanking. Publishers Weekly, you find a lot of our stuff in. So it overlaps a lot, but we do have books that are a little more dense, to say the least. I graduated with a degree in a double major in English and publishing. The publishing degree I self-designed. So I took a combination of creative writing courses, and then I took a few marketing courses, and then a few of my regular English courses overlapped. And then I have a minor in WGS that I unfortunately don't use very much, but I like to mention it regardless. And so, yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. I decided kind of early on that I really wanted to work with books, but I didn't want to necessarily be an agent. I don't know if I really wanted to be a writer. And I did about 4 internships while I was at TCNJ. I did a very, very tiny internship with a publisher that had like 8 people. I interned with a feminist imprint in New York called the Feminist Press for about 6 months. And I did 2 internships at Princeton in sales and publicity, where I work now. And now I actually manage interns. That's very cool. So yeah, I think that's my shtick.
Now, Carly, you're in a more traditional kind of press, but it's a little bit different, and you work with 2 different imprints. So could you talk about that?
Sure. So I'm Carly. I graduated in 2015. So I currently work for Guilford Press. They're my full-time job. And Guilford is like Princeton University Press, an academic publisher, but I would say also more of a professional publisher. A lot of our books, while some of them can be used as grad school level textbooks, they're mostly psych resources that clinicians can use in practice. So very practical, manual oriented, like using while you're in the office type of materials. And most of our list is psychology, but we also have some geography books, some literacy books for educators, and some research methods books for researchers. And yeah, I'm in marketing at Guilford Press, and have been in marketing since I started working there. And now I currently focus on exhibits. So conference work, because in the academic and professional sphere, there are a lot of meetings that are held, especially in psychology in various areas, for professionals to gather, much like this, and talk about their specialties. So we always try to have a presence there and make sure our books make it to the people who need them. So that's most of what I do now. But I also do some side work at Spencer Hill Press, which is a very, very small YA publisher. And I edit for them. So basically, back in the day, and I guess this ties into how I got into publishing. While I was at TCNJ, I was an English major, and I had a marketing minor and an interactive multimedia minor. I ended up not, I thought about self-designing a publishing major like Tyler, but changed my mind because I couldn't find a way to cobble the courses together the way I wanted them to work. So I took 2 minors instead. I took a lot of internships while I was at TCNJ. So over the summer, I picked up intern work, most of it unpaid. But eventually I ended up interning all over the place. I interned at an agency, I interned at a trade publisher, Beaufort Books, and I interned in the sales department for a textbook publisher. So I was like in sales, in publicity, in agency work, and I was trying to get a taste of everything. And then eventually I ended up settling in marketing. And Beaufort ended up being tied to Spencer Hill, and that's how I ended up working with them, was because of my internship work with them. They liked my proofreading, and I ended up doing some freelance work for them, and now I edit for them. So yeah, opportunities are all over the place. And yeah, so that's mostly what I do and how I came to publishing. It was a lot of, I knew when I got my major that I wanted to apply it in the publishing sphere, but I didn't know a lot about publishing. And everyone encouraged me to get a taste for it, to like put myself out there and see what the work itself was like. And though it was difficult, I would say that the internships were definitely good exposure. I learned a lot about how the publishing machine actually works and how there are a lot of different parts. Not everybody ends up in editorial. Not everybody wants to. And it was very cool to be able to experience all of that. And I'd say it definitely helped with kind of finding where I wanted to fit in.
Thank you. Lindsey, what about you?
Unmute here. Can you hear me? Cool. So my name is Lindsey Dietrich. I graduated from TCNJ in 2008, so a little while ago. I work in sales for Harvard Business Review Press, which is the book publishing arm of HBR. You might know them from the magazine. It's kind of a pretty big media company. But we publish business books. They are not textbooks, they are trade books. So books that you would find, as Tyler said, in Barnes and Noble or in the airports, the big channel for us. They're written by academics for a practitioner audience. So, people who actually do business and kind of are out there, working in management every day. The books are written by academics. They're written by current CEOs or former CEOs sharing some of their best practices. They're written by consultants, so from big consulting firms that kind of helping. Then the goal really, I think, for us is just to we say to rid the world of bad management. So work is a huge part of people's lives. So these books are intended to, to help managers and executives and leaders do a better job, and make the company a great place for people to work, improve the bottom line, be better in society. So I find it very meaningful, actually, and it is sort of a publishing path that I did not think I would be. I never thought I would be publishing business books, and I especially never thought I'd be in sales. So when I was at TCNJ, I applied to grad school. My intention was to get a PhD and be a professor. So I entered a master's program at Boston College, and as part of that, I taught freshman writing, in the classroom, was able to design syllabi and choose texts, and that was a great experience. But I will say that, sort of at the end of the master's program, if I'm just being perfectly honest, I was kind of tired of having no money and being in school. And I was like, I want to get a job. So I need to go get a job. But at that time it was 2010, which is kind of the height of the Great Recession. So I applied to over 100 jobs, so thinking, editorial, thinking, I did some student affairs jobs that I applied to. And eventually I kind of was just like, I'll try sales. It was literally like, I need some kind of job. It was a really, really competitive, tough environment with no jobs. So my first job was working for an academic publisher called Xanadu. And what they do is they work mostly with the business school, and they do kind of custom textbooks for business professors to use in the classroom. And I got that job kind of it was almost lucky, because they had hired another sales rep who was a former teacher, and they kind of liked the way that he was able to, to relate to professors in the classroom, because he had been in the classroom himself, so they said, okay, you've taught freshman writing, so, we'll kind of take a chance on you, and you can, speak with professors about what's important to them, So I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved on to HBR Press, which is much more of a trade publisher. So kind of thinking about, prepping books and releasing them kind of into the market, as opposed to preparing them for one particular individual course, out of school. So what I do now is, I actually primarily sell to companies, but in terms of sales roles, a lot of publishing sales reps will sell to bookstores, and that should probably be my cutoff. So, but any questions, on the sales piece of it, I find it very exciting and challenging. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsey, and Catherine. She's making herself known, right? So Sam, could you talk a little bit about the kind of publishing you do, because you do something very different than everyone else. And so, and I'm going to post the link to your company as well.
So, hi everybody. I'm Sam Atzeni. So I am the publisher for Read Furiously Publishing. So this is a publishing company that I started in 2012 with my partner, who's my business partner, my life partner, all my partners. So as someone who's in the small pub, indie pub kind of business, I wear all the hats. I do acquisitions, I do sales, I do production. It really, the purpose for starting it was I was a professional writing and journalism major at TCNJ, and I graduated in 2006, which is unbelievable. And then I went back and I went through the master's program and I graduated in 2009. And the goal was always to be in publishing, but it was kind of hard to break through. It was kind of hard to figure out where I fit. Just to give you a little bit of personal background, I am a biracial queer woman on the autism spectrum who grew up poor in an ESL household. So I didn't fit into any boxes. So one of the things that I was doing is I was working as a faculty tutor at Bucks County Community College, and I was talking to a colleague of mine who also has a very similar issue where she didn't fit into a box, and she was saying how hard it was to break into publishing, and we were just kind of bouncing ideas back and forth. And I said, you know what? I said, there's no seat for us at the table, so I'm going to make one, and I'm going to bring everybody with me. So that's what we've been doing ever since. We try to publish a variety of diverse voices from different backgrounds. We are very fortunate that our authors take a chance on us and they support us and work with us. We are also involved in reading activism as well. So every book we publish, Read Furiously gives 5% of the proceeds to literacy programs that we work with in the community. And we offer that to our authors as well to match it. So there are certain books that are kind of heavily involved in building little free libraries, reading is fundamental programs. Some authors who have experienced a lot of trauma and are writing about that trauma, sometimes we donate to the places that have helped them. So we do a lot. It sounds very exciting, but it's really just, I built an office in my house and that's my office job. But it's really, really fun in terms of all the different stories that we put out, because we do have a mix of TCNJ alum who have approached us. We have people that we've just met, because the thing with indie and small publishing is you have to get creative because nobody knows who you are, and you spend a lot of time explaining who you are, which I've gotten somewhat good at. I hope I get better. So we've done a lot of different community work. So we're involved in the Trenton Punk Rock Flea Market. So we've worked with them and we've gotten some of our authors from them. We've also done smaller publishing kind of conferences and we've gotten our contacts from them. So one of the things I will say about small publishing is you get really creative with being seen. And that has definitely helped me out of my comfort zone, because I'm usually not the person who's like, hey, look at me, I'm here. But I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of talented authors. So I don't have to talk about myself. I could talk about how excited I am to be near them and to work with them. So that helps a little bit.
Thank you so much. Now, like I said, I posted links to everybody's companies and especially to Read Furiously in the chat. One of the questions that I have for all of you, because you do lots of different kinds of publishing, and we're thinking about the sort of future of publishing, and we hear a lot about that. But I guess one of the questions I'd like to ask is what, especially among college age people who are thinking about careers, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that they or you may have had before you entered the field? And this is really, open to everybody.
If I may.
Carly, go ahead.
I know I'll come straight in with mine, because I was one of those. I definitely feel like I had a pretty standard trajectory where when I was like a baby child, I was like, I want to be an author. I was like, I want to write books forever. And then I was like, I want to edit books forever. I wanted to be an editor. And then I, found out a lot more about, publishing isn't just editing. I feel like a lot of the time people get into it like publishing is editing and that's it. There are a lot of aspects to publishing that people don't think about. There's a lot of aspects to editing that people don't think about. There's like different types of editors, because you have your acquisitions editor who's going out and looking for material to publish, looking for the new ideas, the new stories to tell, the new areas and fields that people are delving into when it comes to professional and academic publishing. You've got your production editors who are keeping things on schedule. They're trying to make sure that the book happens on time. I'm doing all that management work, coordinating with printers, making sure the book gets made. People don't think about that. And then, of course, there's the departments other than editing. The marketing of the book, making sure people actually hear about the book is very important. Selling the book, making sure the book ends up in the hands of the people who are going to be using it. And design. People often don't think about design in publishing, but a lot of publishers have their own in-house designers who do covers, who make sure that the publisher has like a clear brand. There's a lot of different types of work that fall under the publishing umbrella, and I feel like that is it is a common misconception that it's like if you go into publishing, you need to be really good at writing and be an editor, and it's like that's not necessarily true. I feel like communication is very important across all departments. Knowing how to communicate is important, but you don't necessarily have to end up being the wordsmith at a publishing house. There are a lot of different ways to apply English skills there.
Yeah, I would agree. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to build right off of that and say, like, yeah, I totally agree. I think that people will think like, well, if I'm an English major, I need to be an editor, right? You know, because that's where the skills, there's kind of a direct transference of skills. But I don't think so. You know, I find that I use kind of the skills that I developed, you know, in my English major as a salesperson all the time. You know, you need to be a good communicator, good writer. You need to sort of be observant, you know, in terms of listening to your customer to kind of pick out pain points that you might sell to. You need to be a critical thinker to be able to pitch your product, you know, appropriately. So I think there's actually a lot of transference there as well. Sorry, she was fine. She was fine until I hit unmute.
Yes, and to all of it. I think the other thing that kind of surprised me the most and surprised our authors is the scope of everything. So one of the things that we do is, because we're smaller, we sit with our authors and we say, listen, what you think is going to happen is not going to happen, because we always say we don't have Penguin money. And I know there's other publishers other than Penguin, but we know that that's, you know, I have my library behind me and I can tell you that there's lots of Penguins sitting there. So we have to be very upfront, but I think one of the things are the questions that we get from our authors that I'm thinking, oh, I didn't consider that. There's so many books published every day. So one of the things that I'm very happy about is that being a good reader is a big part of it, which I love, which I've always loved. That's why I was an English major. But I think the scope of it was probably the most surprising. And one of them is how authorship is presented depending on the level that you are in publishing, and also kind of what's expected. So we work collaboratively with our authors, but one of the things that surprised me is when I am working with an author, they say, okay, well, how much do I owe you? And I didn't know that there was a hybrid form of publishing where authors, you know, invest. And that was very surprising to me because we're indie and we're small, but the way we approach publishing is very traditional for trade publishers. And I think that over the years, I've learned a lot of different things about what people expect, what people don't expect, and how people actually visualize publishing and what a published work looks like.
I would say, just to add to all of that, is especially when you're trying to figure out what kind of publisher you maybe want to intern or work for, I would say do not start with looking at like the big five, or I guess technically now like the big four, because yeah, right, that's insane. Because personally, I think there's so many benefits to working for like an indie or a nonprofit or an academic publisher. One is that the lists are smaller. So instead of being at a publisher that publishes hundreds of books a year, some publishers do literally 10. And there's a lot of care and attention and put into them. And there's a lot more mission like going into it. So when I used to be a feminist press intern, there was a very, very clear mission of the types of books that we are publishing, what we're trying to say, what we want our audience to think of us, and like what missions like we're supporting. But you know, larger companies have multiple imprints that all have different missions. So it's like, I think they actually all have this now, but I know Simon and Schuster specifically has like a conservative like imprint, but like they do a lot of like left-wing publishing. So it's a lot of like contradicting ideas. So like if you want to work from a publisher that has like a very strong stance on an issue or has like a very clear moral compass, you might want to work somewhere smaller. Also, you also might not want to work with the books that you read. I made that mistake. I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but from a publicity standpoint, I think working with nonfiction is more interesting. We have a lot of our authors who are like Nobel Prize winners, and then we have some who have like testified before Congress. And so I find that really interesting in like the pitching process of like, this person is like a really good expert on global warming. And I think that kind of like hook to the modern day and what's going on is a cool thing to work on. I would find publicity for books like of fiction, like I have no expertise in that, and I would find that really difficult. But some people might really like doing that. So I think don't always go with like what you have on your bookshelf with what you want to actually work with, because it might not line up.
Carly, we can't hear you. Perhaps your battery has died? Okay. Well, Tyler, just to sort of piggyback on that, one of the things that I think is really interesting working with a lot of aspiring editors, aspiring publishers, is that when I talk to students, that's where they always start, right? They always want to start with the books that they read. And so I'm going to take that advice and run with it from now on, right? Because I think that that's a really good point, is that maybe you don't necessarily want to be so closely identified with the books that you're working with. Carly, are you back on?
I hope so.
Yes.
Okay. The Bluetooth freaked out. It happens. I was just going to say that it's all valuable. Like I coming from someone who interned at a variety of different places. And I feel like a lot of people are like, well, if I'm going to go into publicity, I have to do all publicity internships, or if I'm going to go into editorial, I have to get all editorial internships. And it's like that's not true. Like every little bit of experience you get, even if it's non-publishing experience, is very valuable to trying to get a job in the field, I would say. People were always very excited when I had, told them that I did something in in an area that was different, that I had an understanding of a different area of publishing. So you don't have to feel like when you're applying for internships or when you're looking for things to add to your resume, you don't have to feel like it all has to be one thing. And sometimes it's even more helpful to try different things at that point, because then you'll get a better idea of what you want to do. And that will help you later, because always I feel like it's helpful in publishing to have an understanding of what everyone else is doing. That's always very helpful. So it doesn't go to waste.
Yeah. So thinking about sort of where we are, a lot of things that people have talked about with the pandemic has been how people sort of have returned to reading, or at least told everybody that they've returned to reading. But I was wondering, what kinds of challenges do you guys see the field facing, or the industry, or your, Tyler, you mentioned that you're working as an intern supervisor now, which just makes me just want to cry a little and with joy. We're all grown up. Well, you guys are, I'm still not, but I think that this idea, what are some of the challenges that people are either facing going into the field, or that the industry is facing right now?
I could say a huge one, which is like kind of complicated, but I won't mention, is like supply chain issues, which is affecting everyone from top to bottom. I think like the main public has just kind of become aware of this in the past couple months, but like we've been dealing with it since August. So that's a huge thing that I think is going to happen on the holiday season, especially because now people are just ordering online more than they ever have. So if you need to order books for Christmas, literally do it in the next 2 weeks. But I could at least say for us is that we've done a lot of changing on how we do a lot of our author events and promotion, because we had like a whole flurry in March of 2020 where we had to just cancel everything for the next few months. And it was kind of difficult because some people do better in person versus being on camera, but we actually found there were a ton of benefits to online events. So anyone could go to them. So we could have an author have 2 events in a day, and like one was on the East Coast, one was on the West Coast, and people could tune in from everywhere, We had one event that had like multiple countries people were kind of tuning in, so that was great. But then an issue with that is people are not in person to buy books. So there's like a greater audience going on because anyone can tune in and watch them, but people are not physically in bookstores to buy books. Also, it's unfortunate because it's always fun to have an author go on tour. So those are two issues like at the moment that we're dealing with that will probably continue for quite a while.
I think one of the good things, because I always try to look at the good thing, even though the global pandemic's pretty bad. But what I appreciate is I also worked in indie bookstores as well. So I got to kind of see how indie booksellers work, and I got to be that indie bookseller that harassed people because of my favorite book that came out. But I think the fact that people are turning more towards supporting small local shops has been really helpful. Bookshop.org is, it kind of imploded. Like it's amazing how it just kind of like everything just appeared, and they were trying to run in beta, and it's I'm not saying that they're taking down Amazon, but as a small press who is often have difficulties with Amazon, let's say, it's nice to see that there is more of a digital presence. And for a little guy like us who've always been digital because that's cheaper that way, it's been really, really great because now I feel like we're finally on footing with some of the mid-sized publishers and some of the guys we look up to, the publishers that we really want to emulate. So it's nice to see that that's kind of given us a little bit of an advantage that we didn't know we were looking for until it happened. So yeah, so global pandemic, bad. Digital presence, great.
I will chime in and say that one of the things that really heartened me amidst all of the darkness and sadness was that when all of it happened, and it wasn't just Guilford either. There were a lot of other publishers who do academic work, who do professional work, who were saying like, what can we give to people right now? And a lot of publishers were like, here are free resources. Like we've pulled these chapters from our books that you can use right now. We've pulled this material that could be very helpful to you in this moment for educators, for parents, for clinicians and therapists. Like Guilford did a resource page. I think Brooks also did something. Like there were various other publishers who were just like what can we put out there right now that people can just get their hands on and use immediately for free. And I thought that was a really heartening thing to see, because like that's like what we do. Like we're trying to put resources out there to help people. Like that's what the what our publisher is trying to do, and it was good to see people kind of rise to that challenge. So that was really nice.
I would say a challenge that we faced, and I think this is sort of, it's bigger than the pandemic, but the pandemic really kind of exacerbated it, is the dominance of Amazon. Just that most people, when they buy a book, they think I'm going to go to Amazon. And so what that does to you as a publisher is it kind of puts all your eggs in one basket, when Amazon shifted to selling only essential household items during the pandemic, that was huge because when they stopped buying books, it was this, it just tanked, So I think one challenge that publishers are facing now is thinking about how can we diversify our channels and how can we sell in places that are not Amazon? And for us, airports were a big channel and they also tanked, So my job actually is selling kind of directly into companies and directly into events. So that was something that we really tried to shift an emphasis toward, because it just helps you to have a broader portfolio where there's, a little more of a safety net versus relying everything on Amazon.
Oh, you're muted, Dr. Steele.
The way my students wish that I was most of the time. So one of the things, I just want to encourage people to also start using the chat to put in questions or use the raise hand function. I don't want this to just be the just to sort of suggest that I have the only question. But one of the other things that I would like you guys to sort of talk about that I think is interesting is that when we're thinking about the relationship between Sigma Tau Delta, right, and publishing, right, we're also thinking about sort of, intellectual path and career path, and you were all active in Sigma Tau Delta. So, are there things opportunities that you had through Sigma Tau Delta or through the conference or through the local chapter that have served you well as you've moved into your careers?
Okay. So I also have the immense privilege of being an adjunct at TCNJ as well. So I never left, which is nice. But one of the things that, yes, there were a lot of opportunities when I was in Sigma Tau Delta, but I think the thing that I took away the most that helps me every day is that I was, when I was an undergrad and a graduate student, I was surrounded by people who loved what they do, who are excited to learn, excited to share ideas, excited to lift each other up. I feel very spoiled because when I talk to people about my college experiences, they usually say, that didn't happen for me. Nobody did that for me. And I feel like that motivates me, especially because, it is hard. It's wonderful to be in publishing, but I'm running my own business also, and it can be very hard. And I think the thing I take away most is just being around people who made me better every time I was near them or made me want to be better. And that's the memories I have of Sigma Tau Delta. And I use those memories whenever it gets a little bit trying.
I feel that. And just like being inspired all the time. Like I remember being a part of it, like being exposed to other people's really like amazing thoughts and ideas about what we were reading at the time, what it was like being in a really intense special book club. Which is like it's really hard to like I don't know, personally I find it difficult to join any book club these days, be in a book club, but it was like being at TCNJ, being in Sigma Tau Delta. I was very involved in Inc. Being in Inc. was like being in like yeah, was a very legacy, that was like being in a very special like book club. You had a lot of common material to talk about. You could go deep on all of these amazing and interesting topics that, I feel like in the day-to-day of adult life, you don't often get the opportunity to delve deeply into things like that, to really think and contemplate and think about the deeper ideas. So that is very special, and being able to write about that and then to share that, because when I went to the conference, I did creative work. I was sharing poetry, and it's like being able to do that, to be confident in my work, to be able to share it with peers who also were confident in it, and to be inspired by them and their own work was very special. That's a gift and really good to have.
Yeah, I think presenting at the national conference was a great kind of a great experience because it gets you up in front of people, it gets you answering questions from the audience, and I think a lot of times in college, yeah, you do presentations, but it's to a classroom of your peers, everyone in the class. This was kind of more of an audience of strangers, so I think that, thinking about sales, that kind of helped me because, I'm presenting to strangers all the time, getting questions, learning how to answer them. So I think that was a really good opportunity to kind of get out of your comfort zone, as you say, and learn to, some presentation skills and some good communication skills.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think also, especially, you don't realize how hard it is to find those specific communities once you're out of college. Work kind of counts, but then sometimes like it kind of doesn't. So I think having a group of people to share those same ideas and also just network with and just kind of know what's out there and who's doing who and who's working here, and like this person tried this job and they didn't like it and you might like it. So that kind of community to share and discuss and talk and have that like common interest is really hard to find once you get out. And so I think you should definitely take full advantage of that. And also, it's always just really nice to be able to, kind of like Lindsey said, work on your communication skills. also in terms of like working with a group and like presenting that to people, because publishing is a very, very collaborative effort. There's so many steps and departments that work on like one book. And so I think being able to learn how to work with the team, communicate to another team, it's really invaluable. So.
Okay, I'm going to take us out of the spotlight mode, and so that to try and encourage questions. And so just to let you know that that's happening. And so also for, you guys just mentioned the idea about networking. One of the things I'm posting in the chat is that if you guys use LinkedIn, there is a LinkedIn Sigma Tau Delta group that has 5,000 people in it, which is not too shabby. And that's a way of continuing to network through Sigma Tau Delta even after graduation. And there are people in all sorts of different industries, and that's one of the interesting things that you can see. So what questions do people have, or what questions do our speakers have for one another? In a total Sigma Tau Delta convention panel move there.
I guess something that I always find interesting about when talking to other people in publishing is what made you realize that yeah, this is what I want to end up doing. I want to be here versus somewhere else, because I've met a lot of people in publishing who've come very different ways. I have people who've come from vastly different fields, from science-based fields, from business-based fields, who didn't start in the English area at all. So what made it click for you?
I always say books are my superpower. So you know how Superman gets his like power from the sun? If I stand near books, I feel like my levels go up. But honestly, it's every time I hold one of our books in my hand, because I look at it and I look at everybody who worked together on it, and the late nights and the conversations, and it's just, I don't know, it's very addicting because I hold it and then I think I want to do another one, and then it's more sleepless nights, more exhaustion, but the cycle never stops. And honestly, it's not even just our books, which I'm very, very proud of, but even just being in a place where there's lots of books and just seeing that, there's thousands of lifetimes in there. Yeah, so books are my superpower, and just holding one, just being near one, smelling one, just being really weird about it. Like that's how I know I'm in the right place.
It is wild to think that every single one of them had a whole bunch of passion put into it.
Unbelievable.
Real quick, Albie had a question. I saw a hand go up, and so I want to give a chance.
So I was going to start typing it. But the topic of political views kind of in publishing came up a little bit earlier, and obviously books about politics get published all the time. Have any of you had circumstances where you didn't agree with something that you had to publish, or you kind of were sort of challenged maybe politically by something you were working on? It can be politics, views or whatever, but kind of framework for that.
Yeah, I actually have I wouldn't say a good story, but a very specific story about this. So when I was an intern at Princeton for the first time, so we have a huge education list, and they're not textbook, they're books about education. And where Princeton falls on the political spectrum is we publish everything kind of within reason. So we have some authors who are very explicitly very far left, anti-capitalist, that kind of vibe. But then we have some authors who kind of fall more center. And there is one book in particular, I will say the name so you can feel free to look it up. And it was published right when I was an intern, called The Case Against Education. And the crux of the book was that too many people in this country have degrees. And yeah, exactly. And their argument was pretty much that it, for certain groups, it delays other points in life. So I picked up this book and I like kind of opened it, it's like, what's going on here? And I kid you not, one of their arguments as to why too many people have degrees is that it delays women having children, which is an insane idea, and I don't care for that. And the author is like a Fox News contributor, but we publish books across the spectrum. I'm a firm believer, if you take 2 steps forward and like 2 steps back, like it's 4 steps, but you're at 0, because you can't say everything and then still say something. And of course, also this person had a degree. And Princeton is an Ivy League school that has a mid-size publisher like attached to it. So I kind of found that to be incredibly hypocritical. And a lot of people at the press thought it was incredibly hypocritical. But also anyone in publishing will tell you this, that, you know, editors do have a lot of power because in cases like they're the ones who are bringing in projects. And sometimes it is hard to stop that train once it has left the station. So like that's an example of a book that we published that I did not really agree with, that put a bad taste in my mouth. And it was very talked about at the press where I am, that a lot of people did not like it. But then we also just published a book, I think this was last summer. It's called like The Campus Color Line. That's about like the importance of desegregating colleges. Very different messages. But also when you have a publisher that publishes well over 200, almost 300, if not more than that, books a year, you're gonna have conflicting messages, I think, sometimes. So that is an example of something that I think happens a lot, and I think it's happening more and more in this political environment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could speak to that too. You know, I think working for a business publisher, you know, I would say personally identify probably as more liberal or more left. But, you know, business, you know, typically is associated with, you know, more, you know, capitalist kind of conservative values. HBR as a publisher, I don't think people would really sort of think this at first glance, but we actually publish a lot of really progressive stuff on business, you know, that business needs to, do more in the world than just make money, you know, that you can't just, you know, profit, you know, can't just prioritize profits for shareholders or, you know, so we do a lot of stuff that I really do agree with, that I think is very impactful. But on the other hand, you know, just because business is, you know, something that people sort of associated with more conservative types of views. You know, we published a book, for instance, on how companies really, if they want to improve their bottom line, they need to be constantly monitoring their customers and you know, watching everything that they do. And I think that most people here would be like, oh my God, I'm horrified by that. But I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, that I saw in that book is that it was heavily research-based. You know, it was, you know, by authors who were very smart, you know, so I think you can, there are kind of some saving graces where you can see that, you know, there was a lot of work that kind of went into this and a lot of research and a lot of rigorous thought that went into it, you know, and I mean, we're unfortunate we don't publish anything that's like out and out offensive, you know what I mean? Like we would never do that. But I think that, you know, all of our books kind of meet a certain standard of quality. And I think that whether you personally agree with, yeah, I would love to be monitored all the time by a company or not, you know, you can kind of appreciate, you know, what's gone into it and the fact that it is kind of a really rigorous piece. So.
Thank you.
Thank you all so very much. Sam, did you?
Sorry, I just have one more thing. I'm just saying, with a small press, because we're so close knit, I think we have a little bit of an advantage over that, because then we can kind of almost kind of protect our authors. I have a lot of authors who are writing really hard stuff that they can't get published anywhere else. They've been rejected by multiple publishers. I had one author who she wrote an entire poetry book about surviving rape. And she, you know, it was a lot of nights of crying on the phone and working through it and kind of birthing this book. And so I have a lot of authors like that. And so if someone comes with a manuscript and it's not going to keep them safe or make them feel safe, we have the right as a smaller press to kind of say, no, thank you. This isn't a good fit for us. I get kind of mama bear like that because I do want to protect all the voices that have trusted us with their work, but also we only publish about 7 books a year, so we can work more closely with that.
I will chime in on that just to say that it shows that the hierarchy does matter, and that the market really affects this, because whoever is at the top is going to sell what will sell, and sometimes that's not for good reasons. And that's I've been at a publisher where the publisher, like the person in charge, wanted this book to happen, and everybody else was like, please no, we like don't do this, but they were in charge and the book happened. So, and I've also been, and I'm at Guilford now at a publisher where the owners of the company are amazing, and what they take on they believe in, and that they make that part of their ethos. And so that matters. that affects things, and it's very hard to have to, you know, go along with that, or take a stand against that. That's something that I hope will change. I hope that publishing will be, and it seems like it's happening. I feel like there's a lot more consciousness in publishing now, but it is definitely a slow process because power is not relinquished easily. So
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being so forthcoming, talking about all of these things. This is really wonderful. I'm really, really grateful to all of you. So it is 10:53, and our next session begins at 11 a.m. and that will be with Diane Steinberg, Enrico Bruno, and Jessica Abalafia, talking about the future of chapter service and community engagement. And so, I'm going to put the little slide up again so I can run out of my office quickly. But thank you all so very much. Thank you.
thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. Great to see everyone.